Hi everyone, it's Mackie here. Today we're going to be talking about photographing water reflections in the landscape. Now, autumn is a great season for capturing water reflections. The range of colors from the foliage at this time of the year can help you achieve some stunning shots. As we head into winter, this offers a fantastic time for capturing shots of mist and fog as it starts forming over the water, which can add some extra drama and mystery to a scene. Here are some of my top tips for getting the best results from water reflections. Okay, number one, which is the best time of day? Ideally, this is morning or evening, because at that time of the day, you're going to get very low wind levels. So it's before the sun comes up and starts heating up the landscape. And that creates that tension in the air, so that thus you get the wind over the lakes and the water. So get there before sunrise or last thing in the evening when that tension in the air starts to drop as the sun sets. Now in this first image that I have here, this is one I recently did in the Dolomites. Now this is a fantastic location. It's a high alpine lake and with this dramatic mountain range behind it with a little chalet over to the left. Now, I arrived there quite early in the afternoon. As we headed into the evening light, the scene picked up this really nice golden appearance. And then the reflections just were perfect. You know, it's all the wind dropped, so that is a crucial time to get the best results. And as you can see in this shot, it was just an amazing reflection. So my second tip is, which filters to use? Now, a polarizing filter, definitely. I would use that for my primary filter when photographing reflections. Now, a lot of people think that by using a polarizing filter, it removes all the reflections. It doesn't work that way. So what it does do is it'll darken your sky down if you have the optimum polarization with the sun at the right angle to the scene. But it does remove some of the surface reflections off the water. It doesn't remove the reflection itself, but what it does is you'll have this kind of like a glare on the surface. It'll remove that so that you can actually see under the water. So if you have any interesting pebbles or rocks or something like that, then you'll be able to actually see those. Now, another filter that you might consider using, which you may not have thought about, is a neutral density filter. Now, something like a 6-stop or a 10-stop will be perfect for these situations, depending on the light levels that you have at the time. Now what this does is when you have reflections that aren't just perfect, you've got a little bit of movement to the water and you want to improve the reflection, just do a long exposure using a neutral density filter, and that will actually flatten those reflections out a lot more than what you see. So an example of this is this image of Lofoten, where I've got this nice little red shack with this great mountain in the background. When I arrived, the reflections weren't brilliant, so I used a big stopper on this just to smooth them out and improve the reflections. But you get the added benefit of creating some movement in the clouds with this as well. So the challenge of achieving reflections at the beginning or the end of the day is light. So this is where you might have a very, very bright horizon. So I would recommend using a reverse neutral density grad. As we showed you in a previous video here, you can see that. Now this will actually control the exposure at the horizon line and still allow you to get a great reflection. Now at other times of the day, I would recommend using possibly a neutral density graduated filter. And what this will do is it'll balance out the top part of your frame with your reflection. Now you've got to remember though, you don't want to overgrad it, because if you think that when you look at a reflection shot, your subject is usually around one stop brighter than your reflection. Sometimes you can have them the same tone. It's quite an interesting effect. But if you actually overgrad it and your subject is actually darker than your reflection, it's going to look ridiculous. So make sure you pay particular attention to that. So next on my list is to consider your location and compositions carefully. So composition, now you can achieve, here's a great tip, when you actually go really low to your water, you can actually get more of the reflection. I've often photographed reflections in puddles. where I've had the camera right down next to the puddle. And so I can actually see the reflection of, I think this particular case, I was doing a lighthouse in New England, and there was a little depression in the rock that had filled up with water. And, you know, from normal height, you don't see the reflection. But when you get right down to the ground level, you can get a brilliant reflection. But you have to think about your aperture in those situations. So because you're quite close to the reflection, you want to use a small aperture to get everything in sharp focus. So another location you might want to consider are beaches. It's a great location for photographing reflections, but you want to capture it with a receding tide. This is really important because as the tide goes out, it leaves the wet sand, which achieves the great reflections. And here's an image that I shot in New Zealand on this huge expansive beach. And as the tide was going out, it just, you can see, just leaves great reflections in the sand of this rock arch. And I just had to have one little person in there just to set it off. So here's another little tip when creating water reflections in the landscape. Creating symmetry often adds a lot of extra impact to images. Now, there's a couple of shots here that illustrate vertical symmetry and horizontal symmetry. And I've got one here of Lake Bled in Slovenia that I shot recently. And we arrive early in the morning, and it's funny how everybody composes things a little bit differently, but I love creating symmetry in images. And in this image, I'm using these dark elements on the sides just to balance out and frame the little island with the church. And then also going on to Lake Matheson in New Zealand. Now again, I arrived extremely early for this one because I had the heads up on the amount of tourists that actually visit this place. So I wanted to make sure I had prime position. And in waiting for the 2 hours for the sun to rise and pick up the color in these clouds, I saw such a change in the landscape with clouds coming and going, the water reflections coming and going. And then right at the crucial time of sunrise, the clouds came in from the sides, and I thought, oh, this creates a great symmetrical image with the clouds reflecting in the lake, picking up the color, and then the wind dropped at that time, and then I achieved the image that I hope to get. So symmetry is something definitely to look for when you're out and about looking for water reflections. Now, the one thing about producing symmetry in an image is invariably you're going to put your horizon line smack in the middle of the frame, which I know it goes against all the rules of composition, but this is a case where you can break those rules. So you've got to be careful when creating symmetry though, so that you're not omitting any crucial elements coming out of the side of the frame. You want to make sure that you include everything that's going to add to that symmetry. Okay, my final tip, and I know you've probably not heard this from anybody else, but carry a little bit of duck food in your jacket, cookies or whatever, that you can crumble up. And you're thinking, why? Well, there was an occasion when I had a group of guys down at a lake in the Dolomites, early morning, and we're all ready. The reflections looked fantastic, perfect, until these 5 ducks flew in, right in the foreground, thinking that they were going to get fed. So I coaxed the ducks out of the lake with my special food and took them out of the shot so the guys could get the image. The only thing was, when it was my turn, I thought, who's going to take over duck wrangling? So, but that is a nice little tip to always keep some food on hand for swans or ducks just to get them out of the way. Okay, so reflection images are probably some of the most satisfying images to create. They always have that wow factor. Whenever you see a reflection image, it's like, oh wow, that is amazing. And this time of the year particularly is fantastic to achieve these reflections. So I hope you found this video interesting, and I'd love to see some of your images. So tag us on your social media platforms over the next coming months. I'd love to see what you're producing. So if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button. We're always grateful for your likes and your kind comments. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining me today. Bye for now.